To order the regular meeting of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, City of Crescent City, County of Del Norte, State of California, on this Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. Would you please call the roll?
Chair and Score,
I'm here.
Commissioner Greeno,
Here.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
All right, would you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to begin with public comment. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that is on or off our agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, if you would please give your name and address for the record and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any general public comment this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Wes White. I want to talk about recycling, and it may take me a little bit longer than 3 minutes. I've been meaning to do this for several months. I know I talked to Mr. Howard a while ago about it, but I'm concerned about the amount of contamination and the lack of progress we seem to be making with respect to the elimination of contamination. I thought it might be useful to talk about some of the knowledge I have about the issue. State of Oregon has over 20 companies requesting that all the recycling go to the landfill. All the recycling. I know that Rogue Disposal has taken over 40 truck and trailers to the landfill. The whole Rogue Valley has eliminated all plastics other than milk jugs. They're only taking 4 items now. Those items are corrugated cardboard, milk jugs, tin cans, and newspaper. No office paper whatsoever. I know Curry Recycling has now eliminated a lot of their plastics. They're only taking a limited number of plastics. I think this board needs to think about what would happen if we lost our recycler. Where are you going to go next? And my concern is that not enough progress is being made quickly enough. The whole problem stems from China banning, who takes about 1/3 of the world's recycling. I don't know if you know that over 4,000 containers were being shipped to China. That's pretty much down to nothing. What's happened is that the Chinese have requested that they're actually put a ban on recycling materials that are over 0.4. They start at 0.3%. They've now gone up to about 0.5% in some instances for some. And that it is backed up. The reason for that is because of air pollution. So they shut down a lot of old factories. Those old factories were not buying, but processing through energy production all the contamination. Because those old factories are gone, now they don't want any contamination. So what has happened is that ships actually are being turned around. China's got backed up materials at the ports. Ports here are backed up with materials. The MRFs are backed up. The MRFs have had to slow down because they cannot process material as quickly as they could in order to get the contamination rates. So they're down in the amount of they're processing. So this is not an Oregon, this is not a California problem, this is a nationwide problem. So I just don't want to see this board drag its feet. I think clear direction needs to be made and move forward on this. My fear is this community is going to lose all its recycling, and then everything's going to go into the trash. And so you can say it's a political issue in saying that, well, maybe, you know, if we just wait a little bit longer, do this or do that. It's going to be a bigger political issue when this community finds out that we can't recycle anything because our processor has cut us off. So that's my concern. My request is that you make this a standing agenda item and report on it every month. I think it's in the best interest of this community, and certainly I have been watching from afar and have followed the progress or lack thereof, and hope that this board will make some hard decisions and move forward for the betterment of the community. I don't speak on behalf of anybody. No one's asked me to speak. I just do it from my opinion about what's best for this community. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Wes. Okay. Yes, Ms. Cooper.
In returning, oops, I'm supposed to turn this off. In returning from a trip, I was a careful observer of what happened when the garbage trucks came by and the recycle trucks came by out of town here in the land of Florida. And they pick up their recycling on a different day than they pick up their trash. So there's no temptation to contaminate one with the other. And they also just lift up the lid. If they see a black bag in there, they go right by. So we did the right thing there. And I think having the recycling picked up on a different day would eliminate some temptation. Although, as we hear, processing is the problem. My philosophy really is tackle it at the source. You have to pick, this community needs to start picking their products according to what produces the least amount of not only waste, but recycling. If I can buy fruit instead of a jug of juice and make some tea and fruit, that's what I choose to do. I don't have a waste stream like other people because I really try to think at the source. And I think we need a whole educational campaign about that. I mean, we do some very good things that way, but we could really make a big campaign. At one time I thought maybe we should put happy faces on products that don't produce waste in the market, and give incentives or, but it's a big problem, trying to find uses for all of these wasteful throwaway products. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other general public comment this afternoon? Okay, seeing none, we'll close our public comment period and we'll go into our open session items. Under consent agenda, we have 3 items: the minutes from January 16th, the payment to CalPERS in the amount of $163,456, and a budget transfer in the amount of $87,132.
I'm going to move to approve consent agenda items 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, but I request that the director do some quick explanation on 1.2 as part of that motion.
All right,
Second.
I have a second. Do you have any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, then, before we vote, Director Ward, could you just give us a brief update explanation on 1.2, please?
I'd be happy to. In general, California has been increasing its regulation pertaining to how public agencies acknowledge the liability associated with retirement and other post-employment benefits. And so as this liability has been recognized statewide, essentially state laws have ramped up the way that we need to calculate and acknowledge this liability. So one way we're required to do this is we're required to do a valuation of our OPEB liabilities, and so we've done that. And increasingly what's happened is that under state law, the liabilities documented in this report start impacting our balance sheet. So in this year, for instance, our audit, which is elsewhere on the agenda, indicates that we had a nearly $100,000, $98,791 additional liability recognized as if it was an expense for our salaries and benefits, because that was the way that they're required to acknowledge the liabilities associated with our underfunded post-employment benefits. The other thing that was calculated in here was essentially what's known as the annual required contribution, the ARC, and that is a number that's calculated, intended to be that if you paid that amount, your OPEB liability would go to zero. Whether or not, because we've underfunded this in years past, whether or not this payment will bring our OPEB liability to zero, I can't say for certain until the next evaluation is done. However, I did speak to Catherine McLeod, who was the author of this document, and she agreed that by making a large single payment to the annual required contribution, the authority will significantly reduce our unfunded actuarial accrued liability for fiscal year 17-18, and thereby improve the authority's financial standing report in subsequent annual audits. So the net result is that right now, if we do nothing, if we just keep paying the $11,125 every year, our unfunded liabilities will increasingly demonstrate that the liabilities of this agency are growing at a faster pace than we would like them to. So by making this one-time payment and then possibly making an adjusted payment, well, we'll have to calculate how much we pay in future, but by making this one-time large payment, we'll address in a very responsible manner this outstanding liability. Is that enough of an explanation, sir?
It is. I just got to shake my head for various reasons,
Understood.
because I love the state of California.
Right.
Yeah, it's, if I could speak. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not enough, but what I would like to see is if we could address this issue at a future meeting also. Now, how quickly do we need to have this paid?
We want to pay it this fiscal year for sure.
Okay.
But if the board wants to defer this and do it in a few months, that would be okay. But I think the most appropriate way forward, my recommendation would be to pay this to later on in the year contract for another evaluation. And when we start discussing what we should be paying going forward, at that point do a much more detailed conversation.
Yeah, I was also thinking from the standpoint of, the way the policy is, to help address that and see as far as the amount that would be paid for the retirees. And of course for, new employees versus existing employees. The other thing is that in that KTP advisors report on page 15 of our agenda, it does address the Medicare structure and what they call the EGWP, the EGWP, and they said that could lower our required contribution. Do you know if we are using that formula?
That would be a most relevant question as we prepare for the next valuation.
Okay. Yeah, because they said that it would significantly, decrease our obligation. So I thought that would definitely should be addressed.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I would suggest that we would table this and address it at a future meeting.
Well, I'm just thinking,
Mike?
is there a point at tabling it now? We know we need to get ahead of this a little. This is, if we need to add addition, which is what I think you're suggesting, potentially, we could do that. We could do that at a later date. I don't think we need to do it all right now, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Is there a reason why we couldn't do it now and then have additional discussion on it later? And if we do decide during additional discussion we want to put another sum into it, just
Well, I was actually hoping that we wouldn't have to put another sum into it. Hopefully it wouldn't be any more than this. contribution. I just thought that if we're going to be talking about it, then, we could address it at that point. If it was timely that we needed to make the payment now, I could see, but I thought it would make sense to discuss it in a little bit more detail and then make the payment. At least that's my thought.
The reality is for all of us as public entities, we're falling further behind with these unfunded liabilities. There's no doubt that we are way behind the curve of what we should have been giving. I think making a single payment now to at least offset some of that we're behind is not a bad idea. I think it's a much bigger conversation, obviously looking at the discussions that came forth in the audit. We're not going to be able to make $11,000 payments any longer. We're going to have to be putting a lot more money aside to this, and there's no way around doing that because of the way the governmental process works as far as what they're expecting us to do with these actuarial numbers. I think we're very fortunate this year that we have the resources to pay this amount and still be under our annual change in position. Our change in position annually for this last year was about $169,000 to the positive. So we're fortunate this year that we have this, that we can make this payment and it not materially affect our financial position. But if we don't address this, there's going to come a point in time where it's going to affect our financial position in a negative way, even from the standpoint of the possibility of debt financing or anything that we have to do in the long term if we get further behind with this. And so I think we need to make this payment now, and I think we need to have this big discussion about all of this, Mr. Naffa, especially the formulas, all those things. We've got to look at all this stuff. It's very important. Mr. Ward.
Just to underscore what you just said, in my conversation with Ms. McLeod, she did clarify that, as I said, about $100,000 was added to our liabilities associated with our underpayment of our OPEB liabilities. But she said next year, $1.3 million will have to be added to the liabilities of the agency because that's how they're ramping up. This year, they just had us acknowledge the amount that it had increased, and next year they asked for the entire outstanding liability. So this will impact all government agencies, but ours as well. And she absolutely agreed that making a large payment at this time would be very prudent for next year's fiscal planning.
Yeah, I am definitely with Commissioner Knopf. I want to have a larger discussion on this. I think we need to be prepared, but I don't think it does us any good to hold off and paying that debt down. But that's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Anything else?
I'll reiterate what you two just said. I do think that we need to make the payment just because it's not going to get any better. So,
No, it's going to get a lot worse.
I mean, I just heard that CalPERS lost $15 billion, I think, recently in their returns of investment. So it's not going to get any better anytime soon, unfortunately. So we just need to make the payment.
Okay. All right. That was probably a little bit more than a simple explanation, but that's all right. That's an important conversation. So we'll bring it back, and if you would, yeah, we want more public comment. I opened up public comment on the consent, but since we had an extended conversation, if there's any other public comment, we'll take it. Seeing none, okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair and Score?
Yes, very good. We'll close our consent agenda and move on to our treasurer reports and begin with our director's report 2.1.
Okay, so I'll start with the exciting slideshow because it is a rare time when our Delaware County Transfer Station is closed for any reason. We're only typically closed about 5 days out of the year, but we were closed over the weekend at the start of the month because we wanted to do some repairs. So that's what we had done. So this is a report on that repair. We were not able to get the final invoice and all of the associated documentation completed, and so we'll be probably seeing an invoice for these repairs next month. So we did two things. We repaired the outbound scale ramp, and we repaired a portion of the transfer station floor. So here's before and after, and in process. So you can see the orange painted areas are the areas on the outbound scale ramp that were repaired. Oh darn, I forgot
Time lapse?
and that, well, the time lapse is there, but we do have additional visual aids because those little slats there are placed for carbon fiber struts, kind of. Oh, you brought them. Oh, aren't you great? Kira's been a great help throughout this process, but she helped during the construction. So what she's handing out there are three things. There's the carbon fiber strut that Mr. Naffa is holding currently there, and then there's a little bit of concrete that shows the new concrete product on top of an old concrete base, and then there's an aluminum wear strip. So here's the the ramp repair. So they're inserting the carbon fiber struts. You can see they're sealing them in with epoxy there. They chipped out the concrete. They welded some new metal across the top. They bolted that down. They epoxied the whole thing together. And there you see the finished repairs. This wasn't an issue because when the scale calibration folks came out and they saw that we were having damage on that scale ramp, they've seen other scale ramps like this fail. And they said that unfortunately, when those fail, the only way to fix such a scale ramp is to hire a crane to lift up the scale itself and then fix the ramp, a very, very expensive process. So since we knew that American Restore, for the size of jobs they do, ours was a very, very small job, so we knew that they would have extra capacity. So they were happy to throw in this scale repair as part of the process. So now, looking at the main reason why we brought them in here was to repair the transfer station floor. So the slide on the left is the metal push wall that the garbage gets pushed against, and the bottom part is the concrete itself. You can see there's quite a bit of a gap between those two, and that's concrete that has been worn away. Now, those of us who have concrete slab floors in our garage or in our homes don't think that concrete wears down very much, but if you empty many trucks of garbage, and then you take a big piece of equipment and grab that and load it on, and after 10 years, this is what you see. The garbage will have a sort of vinegary smell, and that it's acidic. And so the combination of the acidic garbage and the mechanical action of the loader will dig down on that concrete. On the right, what you'll see there is the place where they repaired a bunch of the rebar, which the rebar was starting to be exposed, and that was becoming an operational issue. And so how they repaired the rebar was very important, and that slide also shows that over the areas that the rebar was repaired, we had about a 4.5-inch lift of this specialized concrete product. So now we have a time-lapse picture. So, oops, hello, I thought we did. Try to go back. And, oh, here we go. We did not buy a drone just for this. It was their drone.
Thanks for clarifying.
And they'd worked fast, but
It's amazing.
so that's sandblasting. And you can see as he's blasting out, more of the rebar got exposed because the concrete was weakened around it. So they're blasting it out. They're chipping a keyway along the edge of where the pour is, and then they're laying down epoxy and then covering that with a white sand. So the epoxy binds to the underlying concrete, the sand binds to the epoxy, and then the concrete overlay over the top binds to the sand. So they arrived Friday afternoon. We closed Friday at noon. And then that Friday, they were working until 10 o'clock that evening, getting ready for the pour on Saturday morning. American Restore comes out of Huntington Beach, and the concrete product that was used comes out of Ohio. And I'm really glad that they spent so much time. You can see how much time they spent specifically looking at that rebar area and making sure that was all well prepared. That's the epoxy, that's the sand. Here we are at Saturday morning. Because this cures so quickly, part of the reason why they need so many workers is it's got to be laid down and flat within minutes. So that was the pour, and there's the finished product. So they finished Saturday about midday, and on Sunday they had most of the day to cure, and they just came in and picked up equipment. That white blanket was left over it, and we were open and ready for business on Monday, and the floor and the ramp are performing well. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll just say that this is nothing short of amazing compared to where we were 3 years ago when we started talking about spending $1 million to fix this floor, to come in at under $200,000 and be operational and being able to address the future, even from the standpoint if we have other repairs that need to be done in other portions of the transfer station in the future, that's just amazing, and I very much commend you and staff for discovering a better option for our community and for this agency. That's good work, very good
Thank
work.
you, sir. And I'd like to acknowledge Kira's many efforts on this, as she was fairly new to construction projects when she first came on board, and then quickly she was in the middle of both a landfill repair and a transfer station floor repair, and she did well adapting to all of the challenges placed on her plate and performing. So thanks
Good
to
job.
all.
Thanks, Kira. Okay, anybody else? Okay, you want to go on with your report?
Okay, moving on to the report. We are doing ads regarding bottle caps, and the plastic bag ban has gone into effect. We are not, and Jeremy may talk about that further, we're not seeing dramatic changes at this point, but it is making a small difference. Yep, a little early to tell. We have installed 3 new cameras at the Delaware County Transfer Station, and they are currently operational. Skipping over the things that we'll discuss later in the meeting. We did meet with the city staff regarding the recycling bins at the end of B Street Pier and movement of one of the recycling bin and trash pairs to be located in the new dog park. And we're having a follow-up meeting about that.
It's tomorrow, right?
Yes. So the audit will cover later. And then one other note, Huamua has informed the authority that we are required to submit a 5-year permit review for the Delaware County Transfer Station, and that needs to be done before July 2018. So we'll make progress on that. I also included in the director's report an article that Jeremy Herber forwarded to us about the green sword and the other activities that China has done that have changed our recycling markets.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Ward in a general nature regarding his report, other than the specific items we will cover?
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Move on to
treas-
3.1 then.
I'm sorry, I was going to go through the other financial reports
Oh,
really
you,
quickly.
oh, I'm sorry.
So finances are generally going pretty well. We currently have 1.163 million in the bank, plus 198,000 is our final payment. Kathy Brewer is doing a good job keeping our accounts current. Looking over the claims paid by director, you can see once again our largest payment goes to Hambro WSG for the good services they provide at the Delaware County Transfer Station. And then we also had a payment to Hemmingson Contracting for some of the landfill repairs. Generally, it was a pretty big month. And I guess I'd like to highlight, you have a really good gate staff. We don't talk about them enough, but one example I'll give you is that because we were closed that weekend for the transfer station floor repair, on the next day that we were open, Monday, February 5th, we had over 350 cars, which is about 50 cars more than we've had in our biggest day previously. And we had 2 gate staff working that day, Joseph Hernandez and Darren. And they did a great, for the whole day, they balanced out and they were only 61 cents over. So just an incredible performance by our gate staff. And a really big day. Our finances are still very much in the black, even with the budget adjustments that we've made. Our revenues from the transfer station are approximately $37,786 ahead of budget, and our revenues from franchise fees are nearly $8,000 ahead of budget. So our budget is looking fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the claims approved by the director for the bi-coastal media ads for the CRV. Who paid for that? We pay for that?
An excellent question. We really try to use our beverage container grant monies to pay for such ads, and in this case, we were able to do so. They are getting increasingly restrictive in that they really want beverage container money to go specifically for beverage containers, but in this case, since we were focused on what is the right way to recycle bottle caps, it was 100% funded.
And if they really were serious about putting together a bottle bill that really addressed the actual issues in our state, maybe we wouldn't have some of the problems we have. Just saying.
I will forward that comment at my next opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else on our financials? Any questions for Mr. Ward? All right, let's go ahead and move on into the rest of our agenda. 3.1.
Okay, 3.1 is essentially it's a paperwork to follow that follows up the report we had last month. This is some of the paperwork that was submitted to the Office of Emergency Services so that we can get partially reimbursed for the landfill repairs we did. So we're hoping that in response to this paperwork, the authority ends up receiving $87,132, which would be a 75% reimbursal of the cost for those repairs.
Do you need any action from
No
the
action is required
board?
on this, it's an information only.
All right, very good. Well, that's great. Thanks for filing all those paperwork, and hopefully we'll get that reimbursement. All right, we have a couple of other items in regards to our pledge of revenue. We're going to take 3.3, and
Right.
then we'll do 3.2 so that we have them kind of in the right order. So you want to go to 3.3, please?
Thank you, sir. As we had previously discussed a few months back, one of the requirements for this agency is we are required to demonstrate that we have the finances in place and available should there be an emergency that requires response at the Crescent City landfill. So this is known as, it's a financial assurances requirement. And if this was a privately owned landfill, we would actually have to post a bond or set aside the money. As a publicly owned facility, we're eligible to do a pledge of revenue, which essentially means that if we have any major damage that needs to be repaired at the Crescent City landfill, we will use revenues from the Del Norte County Transfer Station to affect those repairs. If we don't have enough resources, we will adjust rates accordingly. So that's the pledge. That means that we'll take care of the financial challenges at the Crescent City landfill, and we'll use the resources of the Del Norte County Transfer Station to do so. Previously, we had started progress on adopting a pledge revenue, but after the fact, Cal Recycle indicated that it was not meeting with their current form, and they would like us to do it again. So it took a little while to move this through review of CalRecycle's legal counsel, but it has now both been reviewed by their legal counsel and our legal counsel, and staff recommend adoption of Resolution 2018-02, authorizing a pledge of revenue agreement with CalRecycle to provide financial assurance for post-closure maintenance and corrective action of the Crescent City landfill. And associated with that, we would also recommend adoption of the pledge of revenue agreement as item 3.2.
All right. Yes.
The amount pledged, talk to me about that. I know we've got some numbers in here, how it was calculated. Is there a specific requirement around that?
There are many specific requirements about how those are calculated. There are, essentially, you have the post-closure liability that's calculated to be essentially your maintenance costs multiplied times the years that you have to apply those maintenance costs. And then you also have potential corrective action requirements. Water-related corrective actions and non-water-related corrective actions. Essentially, if there were an earthquake and the landfill slid out and we would have to scoop it up and put it back in place, that's a non-water-related corrective action. Were there to be all of a sudden a huge release of some contaminant that's detected in our regular water monitoring, that would be a water-related corrective action. And we did engineering reports for both of those scenarios and calculated approximately what we could anticipate as maybe what those expenses would be. And then those are documented within these agreements. But we don't have to set aside that exact amount of money. All we need to do is say, it's kind of count, whatever amount is required is going to come from the Delmarva County.
So we don't have to
Transportation.
show it on our books?
That's
what you're
correct.
saying?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, that's kind of where I was going, but I wanted to make sure. It's a heck of a liability
It is, so we're,
if we had to do it, but we don't.
but the reality is currently, from a cash flow standpoint, we have more than the $656,000 in the worst case scenario.
And we are not anticipating facing these kind of corrective action expenses at all. But CalRecycle understandably requires that people plan for it.
Sure.
I'd make that motion, Chair.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the resolution 2018-02. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Any public comment on this resolution? Seeing no public comment, then we have a motion to approve resolution 2018-02, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority authorizing a pledge of revenue agreement with CalRecycle to provide financial assurance for the post-closure maintenance and corrective action of the Crescent City landfill. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair and Score?
Yes, very good. We'll move on then to 3.2, which is the actual pledge of revenue agreement for that corresponds to the resolution that we just took and addressed some of the questions that were posed to the director. Is there any other discussion regarding this? I will just make one observation that there has been on several occasions people who have questioned the usefulness of the Solid Waste Management Authority and have suggested that dissolving the authority is a good idea. When you look at what is required of us from the standpoint of the maintaining of the post-closure liability of the landfill and the requirements for the member agencies within the Joint Powers Agreement, unless one of the agencies wants to pay up front their portion of this amount of money, which obviously we see as a significant amount of money, it makes a lot of sense from my standpoint as a representative of the city that this JPA needs to stay in place, because I don't want to pay it up front. I'm pretty sure the county doesn't want to.
We'd be more than happy to let the city.
You would be happy to let us pay. That is so gracious of you. Just an observation that there are nuances to some of these things that are not always as evident as others until they come to light where we have to do something, and it provides an opportunity to highlight those things. So
I'd make a motion to approve 3.2, which is to take action regarding the pledge revenue.
All right, have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Do you have any public comment? Seeing no public comment, then would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair and score?
Yes, very good. All right, moving on. The monitoring report, our easy reading.
This is a status report, and yes, it's all very technocratic, but I feel like it's important that the board be informed about what our water quality monitoring is uncovering. In general, we are seeing a slight uptick in volatile organics, which is a concern, but we are continuing to monitor the new wells drilled between the landfill mound and the nearby residences. We are a little bit behind on this month's monitoring in that we need to procure some additional equipment.
Any luck in the pursuit of landowners' willingness to allow us to test their wells? I know we had some pushback after the initial agreement.
The short answer is no. However, there are many areas of concern with respect to that property, and I know that code enforcement is pursuing some of those areas of concern.
Are we going to have to address any future or new wells in regards to the recent repairs and damage that has been done at the landfill? Or were any of our monitoring wells affected by that?
No, sir. And I don't anticipate any additional monitoring requirements associated with any of those repairs.
Good. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
As far as the other wells, what is the concern that we're not able to check those out? To me, it seems like it would be to the benefit of the other landowners that we would check the wells.
Well, it's really an excellent question, but part of the challenge of this is that the specific owners of the property are difficult to locate, and the people who are living on the property are not the owners of the property. And so we're coming up against those kinds of issues. Correct, it could be to their advantage, but they can still say no, and we have to respect the wishes of the people who live there.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? So this is just a file?
Yes,
right.
receive and file.
All right. We don't have anything for the collections franchise, nothing for the transfer station. All other general solid waste authority matters. 6.1, officers.
I'm going to come right out and nominate Chair Enscore to be chair again this coming year.
Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're
Chair.
welcome.
I'm just saying, doing such an incredible job.
Okay.
That's just my
I'll second that.
If I might ask our legal counsel to review the way that we go about these elections? Is there, first of all, is a second required? And please review the sequence of voting.
As far as nominations, I don't believe a second is required, but we now have a first and a second to appoint the chair, and if there are any other nominations, we can act on that.
Okay. Are there? Wow. Okay. Well, that was
amazing silence there.
amazing
I
silence.
wonder why.
Okay, well, we're not taking care of any money here, so I guess all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Wouldn't matter, would it? Okay.
Congratulations.
And I guess it says here that traditionally the chair and vice chair have been from different agencies, so I guess that would be either Mr. Howard or Chair, Vice Chair Howard or Commissioner Cowan. She's not here.
So I'll nominate Vice Chair Howard.
Okay. Do you have any other nominations?
it's up to you guys. Yeah,
You good?
yeah, if that's what you want, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't want to throw Supervisor Cowan under the bus when she's not here.
I wasn't going to, but I would have let somebody else do it. Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. So our secretary this last year has been Mr. Naffa. I don't see any reason why we're keeping the other two, that we can't stay right where we are.
Me neither.
So-
Is that a motion, Chair?
That was a motion.
Okay.
I will make the motion that Mr. Naffa
I know
serve
that
as
the second
our
is not
secretary.
needed, but I'm going to give you one anyway.
All right. Any other nominations? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Do we need to elect Mr. Taylor again for?
It's a one-year appointment, and you just approved his agreement last month. You certainly are free to do so.
Is that sufficient for election?
I believe that would be sufficient.
Okay. So one more year, Rich. All right.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay. Very good.
But I think to be most appropriate, the minutes should reflect that by consensus, Mr. Taylor was appointed as treasurer.
Consider it done. Okay, the audit, 6.2.
6.2, okay. So generally, our audit came out with what's known as a clean opinion, namely that what we represented in our finances was pretty much what they saw as they were looking deeply. As we discussed in the director's report, we did have an extra $100,000 approximately in additional liability associated with our underfunded post-employment benefits, and that impacted our finances. But the main thing that we do here is we can accept this audit, and then staff has comments and responses to the deficit net position. So they had two main things, the deficit net position, GASB 68. So the deficit net position essentially means that, in overview, this agency is in the red. The reason why we're in the red is that we have a liability associated with Crescent City landfill. We started out with the liability associated with the landfill and the liability associated with the transfer station construction, and we're slowly digging ourselves out of that hole. We are digging ourselves out of that hole, but it is happening slowly. And one of the repeated recommendations from our audits has been, you should raise your rates so that you're digging yourself out of that hole faster. And we've generally resisted that because, of course, as a public agency looking over public finances, we try to make sure that we keep our rates as low as we can, and our rates are the lowest at the Delaware County Transfer Station for any similar facility within the region. But we did, in partial response to this comment, adjust our rates this year so that we hope to be getting ourselves out of that red hole a little bit faster. So we did respond in part to that comment by adjusting our rates. The second one is GASB 68, and essentially we're following the county. And so as the county makes progress on addressing GASB 68, so will this agency.
Okay. Questions for Mr.
No,
Gordon?
I just want to reemphasize the chair's comments earlier about liability. And this is, it just goes to emphasize, just based on this and the report the director gave, that I know for a fact, at least the county doesn't want to show this kind of liability on our books. It'd put us in a clear, it put us clearly in a financial position we don't want to be in, carrying that size of debt. But I know the city probably doesn't want to be there too, so this mechanism that we currently set up, even though certain people feel strongly about that mechanism, it does insulate and protect the county and the city from a great deal of liability that we'd otherwise have to carry.
Absolutely. I mean, $2 million for post-closure liability, and then if we're looking at $1.3 million of OPEB liability starting next year, neither one of these member agencies can afford to put that on our books right now. I mean, that would be devastating from a financial position for both the city and the county. We're facing those same realities, not the post-closure, but the OPEB unfunded liability in our own entities. And so I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a bigger question, as Mr. Naffa put up. I don't know how we're going to do this. for an agency our size. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'm shaking my head at the same question with the city. I'm not sure how we're going to navigate these unfunded liabilities going forward. It is a real challenge.
So the action to consider for this audit is to accept the audit and to possibly approve the correction action plan proposed by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority for submittal to Patel.
Okay.
I'd actually so moved.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the audit and approve the corrective action plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on our audit? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll bring it back to the commission. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair and Score?
Yes. Okay. The 6.3 is an adoption of a resolution increasing the amount of impressed cash.
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
So the impressed cash is essentially the cash the authority administrative staff has on hand to make banks for the facilities that we operate. Namely meaning that when you start out the day as the cashier at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, you start with a certain amount of change, so when your first customer arrives with 100, you can give them change for their transaction. Similarly, we make banks for the Gasky Transfer Station and the Klamath Transfer Station. And the amount of impressed cash allows us to do that. By having a larger amount, that will make it a lot easier during the summer months when Gasky and Klamath transfer stations are open an extra day so that we can make the bags. In years prior, when we didn't have this amount of impressed cash, essentially they would need to make the banks by taking money from the previous day's tills, which is fraught with a number of problems. But we believe that the right thing to do is simply increase the amount of impressed cash to $3,800. The ups and downs of this are the risk is that if somebody breaks into the authority and steals, that there might be a slightly larger amount to steal. The advantage is that it makes the operations of our accounting staff much easier.
And because I didn't realize exactly the process, I think it would be good for you maybe to explain that all of those tills and those banks are not tallied up and completed the same day, which is part of the reason why we need this impressed cash. So maybe you could just share with.
So at the end of the day, then of course not only do you have the cash that you started with, but you also have all that day's receipts and all of the credit card transaction totals, all the cash totals, and all the information about the charge customers that we charged to those accounts. So before we enter that into our accounting system, of course, our accounting staff need to make sure that everything's right. So they make sure all of the receipts are right, they balance out the books, and then they make a deposit based on that cash. Only at the point when they've counted all the bags and they've balanced everything and they're ready for a deposit could they possibly take the money from that bag and move it into another one. So again, it does ease the process quite a bit to slightly increase the amount of impressed cash. Because, for instance, on a long weekend like we just had, we were closed Friday and Monday, there's quite a few bags to count through, and those all need to be counted through and balanced before we can make the banks for the upcoming week.
And given this very methodical process of going through this and ensuring all of these things has led to all of our surprise counts and so forth, ever since, obviously, we're not hiding anything, that the entity had some corrective things that needed to be taken to place with its financial processes. Since implementing this, have we had any problems with our money counts?
Every single cash count that we've had since that time has come out to the penny, but this is the amount that they count to, for example. Previously, they would have counted to 3,500. If this gets passed, then they count to the 3,800.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the efforts to keep us informed and whatever we need to do to make sure that our staff is best equipped to serve the public. I think that's a great idea. Any questions for Mr. Ward? Any public comment? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2018-01?
I move that we approve the resolution 2018.1.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Chair and score?
Yes. All right, we're getting close to the bottom here. We've got a couple of things. We have bin polls, 6.4.
Bid polls. So in this case, there's slightly modified request because unfortunately, February 17th has come and gone, and so we do not need a bin poll for that particular event. So all of the other recommended events we have done in the past. So staff recommend approval of a total of 3 authority-directed bin polls, 1 to support the Scotch Broom Bash at Pacific Shores, and 2 to support beach cleanups on Earth Day on April 22nd, and after the 4th beach cleanup on July 5th.
All right, any questions, comments? Public comment. Close public comment, bring it back for a recommendation from the board.
Move to approve the bin polls for the Del Norte Surf Riders for 3 bins, or actually it's 2 bins at this point, 8 on April 22nd and July 5th, and 1 from the U.S. Wildlife. Actually, that was the one.
No, that's it.
So,
You got it. So 3 total.
3 total.
All right,
And then the Pacific Shores Scotch Broom event, March 24th, March 31st, and April 7th.
okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair and score?
Yes. And we have one last item. It's a advocacy item regarding SB 168.
And this is, staff recommend that we authorize the chair to sign a support letter for SB 168 as amended. Essentially, this will require Cal Recycle to establish minimum content standards, minimum recycled content standards for beverage containers sold in California, and also to complete a report regarding the establishment and implementation of an extended producer responsibility program, possibly to replace California's beverage container recycling program. As we've discussed, there's a number of challenges regarding California's beverage container program, and part of the thought is that people who are drinking beverages do not choose their containers. The folks who choose the containers are the brand owners who are trying to sell you the soda or whatever is contained in that, and therefore it is appropriate to make the producers responsible for that container. So that's the concept of an extended producer program. This is not implementing that. This is not recommending that it be implemented. This is merely agreeing that there should be a study done on it.
Okay. Any questions about that? Do we have consensus to send a letter in support of SB 168? We good?
Yes, I was just going to say that delete the last Senator McGuire. You've got it on there twice.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was supposed to be our other elected official. We will make that correction. Thank you, sir.
Okay. We have any public comment on this advocacy item? None? Okay.
Yeah, motion approved, Chair.
All right, we've got consensus. I see consensus. Please go forward with the letter.
Thank you, sir.
Are we done?
We're done.
We're done. We'll stand adjourned until our next meeting. Thank you, everyone.